What's up, everybody? I hope you all had a great weekend. Welcome back to the channel for another episode of the Ask Me Anything series. I apologize for not uploading in a while, but I'm happy to be back. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to every single one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the post. A lot of really interesting ones in this episode. We're definitely going to start focusing more on looking towards next season now that we're kind of in the dog days of the offseason. There isn't a whole lot going on. The first question of the episode comes from Adam, who says, even though they lost Pacioretty, do you think Vegas can make the playoffs again? And do you think we'll start to see more of Eichel's elite talent again? And also, I appreciate the kind words. I'm definitely really confident in the fact that Vegas will probably bounce back and make the playoffs this upcoming season. They had a lot of things go wrong for them this past year. Pacioretty only played 30-something games. Same with Mark Stone. Jack Eichel, they only got 30 games of him, and it wasn't really the Jack Eichel we're used to seeing. He was still kind of getting back into the swing of things. Alec Martinez played less than 30 games. Their goaltending was super inconsistent, and with all that being said, they were still in the playoff race right down to the wire. They didn't miss the playoffs by much. I can't imagine their luck when it comes to injuries and all that sort of stuff is going to be as bad as it was this past season again, so I would honestly go as far as saying I think they're a lock to make the playoffs next season. The next question we have comes from the Sunny Dog 61, who says, do you believe that William Eklund of the San Jose Sharks will pan out to be a star NHL player? Love Eklund in the vids. Thank you for that. I'm definitely going to say yes. I'm a big fan of William Eklund as well. Heading into the 2021 draft, he was actually who I wanted the Red Wings to end up with. Obviously, he was still on the board when Detroit selected, but they decided to go with Edvinsson instead, who I definitely think is going to be a great player, but I really believe Eklund is going to be a star. He actually started this past season with the San Jose Sharks. He made the team out of training camp, and I really believe he played well enough as to where you could have made the case that the Sharks probably should have kept him in the NHL as opposed to sending him back to Sweden, but given where the Sharks are at in terms of competitiveness, it probably didn't make sense to burn a year of his ELC just yet, so they probably made the right decision sending him back, but I definitely think he's going to be one of the Calder favorites heading into this upcoming season. Now, kind of piggybacking off of what I just said, this next question comes from TJ, who says, who are your Calder frontrunners for next season? So like I just said, I think William Eklund has to be up there in that list. Another name I feel like has to be mentioned would definitely be Mason McTavish, who was actually in a similar situation to William Eklund at the beginning of this past season. He made the Ducks out of training camp, played well, probably well enough to stay on the team for the entire season, but the Ducks decided they didn't want to burn a year of his ELC just yet. So I definitely expect him to be in the Calder race, and then also some guys that had their 9-game sample size at the end of this past season as opposed to making the team at a training camp and then getting sent back. Guys like Kent Johnson, Owen Power, I definitely think is going to be one of the better rookies in the league next year. So that's a short list of players that I think are going to be in the Calder race this upcoming season, but if you want to see a longer list, maybe I could do an entire top 10 Calder Trophy candidates heading into this upcoming season video. If that's something you guys want to see, let me know. Next up, this question comes from Barry Neal, who says, what are your opinions on the Blackhawks offseason so far, trading, drafting, and Taves and Kane potentially getting traded? And also, thank you for the kind words. And the way I would sum up the Blackhawks offseason would be confusing. They're obviously heading towards a rebuild. They want to accumulate draft picks, young prospects, look towards the future, and yet they haven't traded any of their better veterans away. They've only moved all of their good young players. They didn't qualify Kubalik or Dylan Strome, so they lost those guys for nothing, and then obviously they traded Doc and DeBrincat. And when the DeBrincat trade happened, I was really vocal in saying that I did not think Chicago got enough in return for him. Two-time 40-goal scorer, one of the better young wingers in the league. I know they got 3 draft picks, one of them being 7th overall, but there's no guarantee that 7th overall pick is even going to turn into anything. I really feel like they should have demanded a can't-miss blue-chip prospect in any kind of return for DeBrincat, but obviously that didn't happen. And as far as the Kane and Taves situation goes, I think it is likely that both of them do end up getting traded. They're both heading into the final year of their contracts, and even though the cap hit is high, it's I think 10.5 or 10 mil for both of those guys, you retain 50% of that. Those are movable deals. Can't imagine Patrick Kane or Jonathan Taves at this point in their careers have any interest in going through a rebuild, which is most likely going to take a long time. Chicago is not going to be good for years. You look at that roster on paper heading into this upcoming season, even with Kane and Taves, they're probably going to be one of the worst teams in the league. Even if Kane or Taves don't request trades, you should probably work with those guys and try to move them so you don't end up losing them for nothing next offseason. Moving along now, this next question comes from NHL Hockey News Reports, who says, do you think that Larkin will stay long-term for the Red Wings, knowing he's only been to the playoffs once with the Datsuk and Zetterberg era and been his whole career in a rebuild? Is he sick of it, or does he believe in Stevie Y? This is actually a really interesting question, and I feel like the answer will become a lot more clear before this upcoming season starts. Elliot Friedman has been reporting here and there that Detroit and Larkin are working on an extension, but if they can't get that done before this upcoming season starts, then maybe I'd start to get a little bit worried that Larkin's future with the Red Wings could be a little unclear clear. He's a local guy, grew up in Michigan, played at Michigan in the NCAA, is now the captain of his hometown team. Obviously, that's a situation I'm sure he likes being in, but you're right, I can't imagine he wants to be losing for much longer. And honestly, I feel like that could have played a factor in why Steve Yzerman was so aggressive this offseason in free agency, getting the likes of Ville Husso to play with Nedeljkovic, obviously David Perron, Andrew Kopp, Ben Schrock, Kubalik, and many others. Players that are actually going to move the needle, make the Red Wings more competitive, bring them that much closer to being a playoff team. I really do feel like Larkin's in it for the long haul, but of course, anything can happen. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. But like I said, I feel like it's going to become a lot clearer on whether they get an extension done before this upcoming season starts. Next up, this question comes from Hoppins NHL, who says, even though this isn't directly related, I'm still curious to hear what you have to say. For people who want to make hockey content on YouTube, what pieces of advice would you give them? And also, I appreciate that. Since we are in the dry stages of the offseason, I figured I would throw in a question like this. My number one piece of advice would just be, don't worry about anything at the beginning, like views, likes, engagement, none of that, because realistically, you're not going to get any when you first start. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to start a channel and your first video goes viral, but more likely than not, it's going to take weeks, months before you really gain any traction. I uploaded so many videos when I first started my channel that got like 5 to 10 views, maybe 1 or 2 likes, and the majority of those people were my friends. So I definitely feel like that's the main thing. Don't get discouraged if you don't get any engagement at the beginning, and maybe try to find some other people in your situation, some smaller channels, under 100 subscribers to collaborate with, introduce your fan base to theirs, that kind of thing. In my opinion, those are definitely the two main things you should be thinking about and try to keep in mind when you first start. Moving along now, this next question comes from Walter, who says, how do you think the Calgary Flames do with missing Gaudreau and Tkachuk, but having Huberdeau and Weegar? I honestly don't expect too much of a drop-off in Calgary's performance. Part of the reason why they were so good this past year was their team defense, their goaltending. Now, I'm definitely not saying that they're not going to miss Gaudreau and Tkachuk. That's 2/3 of a line that completely dominated the NHL this past season. Obviously, you're going to miss those guys, but a lot of what you lost in Johnny Gaudreau, you are getting back in Jonathan Huberdeau, and you're adding Mackenzie Weegar to a blue line, like I said, that was already fantastic this past season and hasn't really lost anything over the offseason aside from Erica Branson leaving in free agency. They still have one of the best goaltenders in the league in Markstrom. That hasn't changed. They still have one of the better coaches in the league in Daryl Sutter as well. That hasn't changed. I think he's going to get the most out of this group. I definitely expect them to be a top 3 team in the Pacific still. This next question comes from Vicky Griffin, who says, after the Avalanche losing Burakovsky, Kemper, and Kadri and not adding a number 1 goalie, do you think they will be any less of a threat next season? I think they're going to be fine. Obviously, I feel like most people feel that way. Maybe they won't be as dominant of a regular season team, but you're going to have Alex Newhook playing a much bigger role. Guys like Arturi Lehkonen are going to be playing there for a full season as opposed to just after the trade deadline. They still have probably the best blue line in the league that didn't lose anything at all this offseason. And as far as the goaltending goes, yeah, it sucks losing Darcy Kemper, but adding Georgiev and having Francouz, I think that's a tandem that's going to be more than capable, especially playing behind that blue line that they have. I mean, we just saw Colorado win the cup with Darcy Kemper playing, I would say, average. It's not like he was bad, but he wasn't exceptional either. The next question we have comes from Ethan, who says, is John Tavares a movable contract? I'm going to say no, definitely not. If there's anything we learned this offseason, it's that John Tavares contract and contracts like John Tavares would be almost impossible to move right now. That's not saying John Tavares is a bad player, because he's certainly not. He's a very good player. However, we just saw Max Pacioretty given away for free, and he was in the final year of his contract making less than John Tavares. Columbus only got a third for Oliver Bjorkstrand. Cap space is incredibly valuable right now, so I definitely think John Tavares' contract would be impossible to move. Like, Toronto would probably have to attach a ton of assets with it just to get rid of it, and that just wouldn't make sense for them to do. This next question comes from Ask a Screenwriter, who says, the Blues haven't been very active this summer, and word is Tarasenko would still like to be moved out, though kudos to him for being so professional on ice about it this past season or so. Could he still be moved? To where and for what? And also, thank you for the kind words. I really don't think St. Louis is going to trade Vladimir Tarasenko, and I don't think they should. I feel like most likely they're going to keep him, and he's going to serve as kind of a rental this upcoming season, and then he'll walk as a UFA next summer. Now, the reason I feel that way is because, again, I'll reference this, what I just said. Max Pacioretty was given away for free. Cap space is of the premium right now, and for a team like the Blues that are cap strapped, they would really have no leverage. Like, Tarasenko makes about the same as Pacioretty, but I wouldn't say he's as good of a player as Max Pacioretty, so I honestly think the Blues should just keep Tarasenko for this season. Again, have him kind of just serve as a rental and then see if they can re-sign him, but most likely I feel like he'll walk next summer. And now for the final question of this episode, this one comes from Pfizer 8000, who says, with the departure of Matthew Tkachuk, do you think the Flames should add add another right wing, as Jonathan Huberdeau is Johnny Gaudreau's replacement, point being, who can replace Tkachuk? Honestly, if I had to guess, I think a lot of it's just going to come from within. I think Andrew Mangiapane is going to be thrust into a much larger role than he was in this past season, where he spent a lot of time on the third line, didn't get a ton of minutes when you consider how many goals he scored. Like, he was one of the best goal scorers per 60 minutes in the league this past season. I imagine he's going to see a significant increase in ice time, potentially even be on that top line with Huberdeau and Lindholm, and I think Mangiapane can also do a lot of the other stuff that Matthew Tkachuk did. Like, Mangiapane's not an easy guy to play against. He's in there in the scrums after every whistle. He finishes his checks. He's a bit of a pest. Is he going to be as good as Matthew Tkachuk? Certainly not, but I definitely think he can be a viable replacement on that line. So that is going to wrap up today's episode of the Ask Me Anything series. Again, like I said, thank you so much to every single one of you who took the time to leave a question on the post. Even the ones that didn't get featured, just know I read all of them and I appreciate every single one of you guys. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.